What if love wasn't enough to protect you from betrayal? In a world where power and pride rule over hearts, Ly Tu Diem, a humble, kind-hearted girl, becomes the silent victim of a twisted scheme. Blinded by obsession, Mai Huong conspires with Toan's own mother to trap him into fatherhood and force a marriage, tearing him away from the woman he truly loves. Lies are served with wine, and innocence is shattered in a single night. Will Toan uncover the truth before it's too late? Don't forget to subscribe and follow this emotional roller coaster where love, deceit, and heartbreak collide. Mai Huong had always known she wasn't the kind of woman men fell head over heels for at first sight. She lacked the softness that made others seem approachable, and her ambition often came off as arrogance. But when it came to Toan, none of that mattered. She was willing to be anything he wanted, gentle, patient, vulnerable, just for the smallest piece of his heart. Unfortunately, Toan had already given that heart away to someone else, a poor, quiet girl named Ly Tu Diem. At first, Huong tried to be rational. She smiled when Toan talked about Diem, pretending not to care. She even forced herself to offer polite compliments whenever Diem was mentioned in company. But inside, it ate away at her like acid. How could someone like Diem, modest, unremarkable, and broke, win the love of a man like Toan? It didn't make sense. It wasn't fair. The more she thought about it, the more the bitterness took root. Until one day, Huong looked into the mirror and finally admitted the truth. She wanted Toan, no matter what it took. Love wasn't going to come to her the natural way, so she would have to take it by force. The idea came to her in fragments, first as fantasy, then as possibility, and finally as strategy. She wouldn't need Toan to fall in love with her. Not at first. What she needed was something permanent, something binding. Something that would tether him to her forever. A child. If she could get pregnant with Toan's baby, he would have no choice but to stay. She believed that once he became a father, he would do the right thing, he always did. He was honorable like that. Mai Huong spent weeks crafting her plan. She knew Toan's schedule, his habits, even his preferred brand of wine. She rehearsed everything in her mind, how she'd smile, how she'd touch his hand just lightly enough to linger, how she'd look at him like she needed protecting. But there was still one problem: how to get Toan to that moment of weakness. Then, to her surprise, help came from the last person she expected, Toan's mother. Madame Lan, a sharp-eyed woman with a spine of steel and a heart colder than winter rain, had never liked Ly Tu Diem. From the first moment she saw her son with the girl, she'd felt a kind of revulsion she couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was Diem's second-hand clothes. Maybe it was the way she smiled with too much sincerity. Or maybe it was just the fact that Diem wasn't someone she could control. So when Mai Huong, in a moment of desperation, confessed her plan to Madame Lan, expecting judgment or rejection, she received something else entirely: support. "Good," Lan had said, sipping her tea as if discussing the weather. It's about time someone brought my son back to his senses. That night, they plotted like generals before a war. A private dinner was arranged under the pretense of celebrating a company milestone. Lan would ensure Diem was nowhere near the estate. Huong would arrive in a soft dress, her hair done just the way Toan once said he liked. The wine would be expensive and strong. And the rest would be a matter of opportunity and timing. Toan, Huong believed, didn't have to love her. Not yet. But he would, eventually, once their lives were tangled in the most irreversible way possible. And with Madame Lan's blessing, she felt invincible. Little did they know, love forced is never love at all. And the trap they were setting would one day entangle them in ways none of them expected. The night arrived like any other, draped in soft silence and moonlight, but beneath its calm surface stirred the storm of a carefully staged betrayal. Toan had been told it was a dinner to honor a small business victory, nothing formal, just family and a few close friends. He hadn't questioned it. His mother often arranged these dinners, and he was used to going through the motions. He hadn't even noticed that Ly Tu Diem wasn't invited. He would ask later and be told she had other plans, or perhaps was busy. The lies were already well practiced. The estate was glowing that night. Candles flickered gently in the dining hall, and soft music hummed in the background. Everything had been meticulously arranged by Madame Lan, down to the temperature of the wine and the dimness of the chandelier light. She had left nothing to chance. Mai Huong arrived early. She wore a dress of pale lavender silk that clung to her in all the right places, and her makeup was applied to perfection, just enough to soften, never overwhelm. Her perfume lingered like a whisper, and her smile was gentle, reserved. She greeted Madame Lan with a respectful bow, and the older woman gave her a nod of approval. The stage was set. Toan arrived shortly after. He looked tired, he had been working late, and his shirt was still slightly wrinkled from the car. But when he saw Huong, he smiled politely and took a seat beside her without suspicion. They shared a few awkward laughs, the kind that come from polite company. He sipped his wine slowly at first, distracted by thoughts of Diem and a half-finished project on his mind. But Madame Lan was persistent. She kept the drinks flowing, topping off his glass when he wasn't looking. The food was rich and laced with notes that dulled the senses. Huong timed her gestures carefully, her hand brushing his arm, her laugh soft and alluring. She played the perfect hostess, while Toan, unaware, allowed himself to drift. It wasn't long before his thoughts began to blur. The wine was heavier than usual. His movements slower. His eyes lingered too long on the flames of the candle. He tried to stand once and stumbled slightly. Huong caught him with a smile and whispered, "Maybe you should rest for a moment." Lan was watching from the hallway, her eyes narrow with calculation. When she saw Toan rise with Hung's support and disappear down the corridor, she closed her eyes and smiled in satisfaction. The bedroom was warm. Hung led Toan to the edge of the bed and helped him sit. His head was spinning now. He looked at her with unfocused eyes and mumbled something, Diem's name, perhaps, or just a confused sigh. Hong leaned in and placed a hand gently on his chest. Toan, she whispered, her voice low and trembling, I'm here. In that moment, she almost believed it was real. That his body would respond to her. That his heart would follow. That one night could undo years of love and loyalty. She leaned in further, pressing her lips against his, but his response was weak, almost lifeless. Still, she didn't stop. Outside the door, Madame Lan stood guard like a soldier at her post. She had done what she believed was best for her son. Love, she had long decided, was a luxury for fools. Families like theirs were built on legacy, not feelings. Diem was a distraction. Hong was a solution. What neither of them could predict was what would follow in the days to come, the guilt, the consequences, the storm they had set into motion. Because when you bend fate too far, it never breaks quietly. The morning after the dinner, a strange silence settled over the estate, thick and unmoving. The sun filtered through the curtains as if reluctant to shine on the truth that had been forged in the dark. Toan woke slowly, his head heavy, his body aching. For a moment, he didn't recognize the room. Then he saw the familiar paintings, the scent of roses from the garden, and realized he was still at his mother's estate, but something felt wrong. Then he turned and saw Mai Huong, still half asleep, wrapped in the bedsheet beside him. Panic struck like a hammer to the chest. He sat up abruptly, memories fragmented and slippery. He remembered dinner, the wine, laughter, dim lights, but the rest was a haze. Hung stirred beside him, feigning drowsy surprise. Toan, you're awake, she said softly, as if they were lovers who had just spent a blissful night together. Toan didn't answer. His mind reeled. Had he really? No. He couldn't believe it. His stomach turned as he looked away, unable to process the confusion and betrayal clawing at his insides. All he could think of was Diem, her gentle eyes, the way she waited for him patiently each night, her quiet belief in love. What had he done? That same morning, Ly Tu Diem stood outside Toan's office, a smile playing faintly on her lips. She had spent the evening baking his favorite sesame cakes, hoping to surprise him. There was something she needed to tell him, something she hadn't dared speak of yet. A quiet hope had been growing inside her lately. A late period. Subtle symptoms. Maybe, just maybe, they would be parents. She clutched the small wrapped box in her hand, imagining his reaction. But Toan never came. She waited for hours, calling his phone again and again, only to hear it ring into silence. When she finally returned home, unease crept in. Then came the whispering, first from colleagues, then from strangers. She overheard someone mention Toan and Huong's quiet night together. At first, she refused to believe it. Toan would never do that to her. He wasn't that kind of man. But everything changed when Madame Lan paid her an unexpected visit. It was not a kind visit. There were no greetings, no pretense of civility. Madame Lan walked into Diem's modest apartment with the air of someone entering a room she already owned. Her eyes scanned the place with barely concealed disdain. "You should let him go," she said bluntly, placing a folded envelope on the table. "For your own good." Diem stared at the envelope. "What is this?" "Enough to start over," Madame Lan replied coldly. "You're a smart girl. You knew this wouldn't last. My son needs someone who fits his world. And after last night, well, things have changed." The implication was clear. Diem felt the words pierce her chest like ice. Her lips trembled, but she refused to let a tear fall, not in front of this woman. "Did you plan this?" she whispered. "You did this to him." Madame Lan didn't answer. She simply straightened her jacket, turned her back, and walked out. That night, Diem sat alone by the window, the uneaten sesame cakes still warm in their box. She stared at the envelope on the table, untouched. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She didn't need money. She needed the truth. But truth, she realized bitterly, had no place in a world built on manipulation and power. Outside, the rain began to fall. Quiet at first, then steady, like the tears she had been holding back for far too long. Inside her heart, something broke, and for the first time, she wasn't sure it could ever be put back together.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Mí Tử Diễm Review. Rất vui vì hôm nay lại được gặp lại các quý khán giả trong tập phim ngày hôm nay. Trong tập phim ngày hôm nay đã có những tình tiết